They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, let me tell you something. After what I did to Bradley Hutchins, that prissy little accountant next door, revenge isn't just cold. It's frozen solid, calculated to the decimal point, and seasoned with 73 years of accumulated wisdom and spite. My name is Arthur Pemberton, and this is the story of how I turned my neighbor's life into a living symphony of karma. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. I remember because Tuesdays were when I worked on my grandfather clock, a beautiful 1842 mahogany piece that had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and my late wife Martha's attempt to paint it teal in 1987. God rest her adventurous soul. I was in my workshop, the converted garage of my modest 2-story home on Elderberry Lane, adjusting the chime mechanism with a rubber mallet. Now, I'll admit, the sound carried. But it was 10:47 in the morning, well within any reasonable person's tolerance for neighborhood activity. I gave it 3 good taps. Bong. 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 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. Officer Ramirez stood there, looking apologetic. Mr. Pemberton, we got a call about excessive noise. Excessive noise? I wiped my hands on my work apron. Son, I was fixing a clock. I understand, sir. Just doing my job. Maybe try to keep it down? I nodded, but my blood was already simmering. I'd lived in this house for 42 years. Raised 3 kids here. Buried a wife from here. And now some newcomer had the audacity to call the police on me for fixing a clock? The next incident happened 4 days later. I was testing my vintage vacuum tube radio, another restoration project. Beautiful 1946 Zenith Transoceanic. I had it on for maybe 15 minutes, listening to a baseball game at a perfectly reasonable volume, when the police showed up again. This time it was Officer Chin. Mr. Pemberton, another noise complaint. From who? I demanded. She checked her notes. Anonymous. Anonymous. The coward's calling card. Over the next 3 weeks, the police visited me 11 more times. I was reported for hammering. I was hanging a picture. Playing music too loud. It was Sinatra at conversation volume. Running power tools. I was using an electric screwdriver to assemble a bookshelf. Making banging sounds. I dropped a pot while making soup. Creating a disturbance. I laughed too loud at a joke on TV. Each time, the officers were polite. Each time, they found nothing illegal. And each time, I knew exactly who was making these calls. Bradley Hutchins. 20 years old. Investment banker or accountant or some such nonsense. Moved in 6 months ago with his pristine Tesla, his Peloton bike visible through his front window, and his inflated sense of entitlement. He wore suits even on weekends. He mowed his lawn with a manual push mower to avoid polluting the soundscape. He once complained to the HOA about Mrs. Chen's wind chimes. The final straw came on a Thursday evening in October. I was in my living room, practicing my trumpet. Now, before you judge me, let me explain. I'd played trumpet in the army band in the Korean War. It had been my solace, my joy, my connection to youth. I practiced maybe twice a week, never past 8 p.m., always with the windows closed. I wasn't very good anymore. Arthritis had stiffened my fingers, and my embouchure wasn't what it used to be, but it made me feel alive. I was working through a scratchy version of When the Saints Go Marching In, when I saw the flash of red and blue lights through my curtain. This time, 2 officers came to the door. Officer Ramirez looked genuinely pained. Mr. Pemberton, I'm really sorry about this. How many times is this now? I asked, my voice tight. 14th call in 3 weeks, sir. And have I broken any laws? No, sir. But we have to respond to every call. It's protocol. After they left, I stood in my living room, trumpet in hand, and something inside me shifted. I'm a patient man. I'd survived war, poverty, loss, and the eternal mystery of how to program a television remote. But this was beyond patience. This was persecution. I looked out my window at Bradley's house. Every light was on, blazing like a beacon of sanctimony. I could see him through his front window, sitting at his computer, probably timing my practice session to file his complaint at the most disruptive moment possible. That's when I decided. If Bradley Hutchins wanted to play games with an old man, he was about to learn that age brings not just wisdom, but creativity, ruthlessness, and an abundance of free time. The war had begun. I spent the next week in reconnaissance. When you're 73 years old and retired, you have two things in abundance: time and the ability to be invisible. People don't notice old men. We're part of the scenery, like mailboxes or fire hydrants. I learned Bradley's schedule down to the minute. He left for work at 7:23 a.m. every morning, never 7:20, never 7:25, always 7:23. He returned at 6:47 p.m., unless it was Wednesday, when he went to some kind of cycling class and didn't get home until 8:15. He ordered takeout on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. He had grocery delivery on Sundays. He went for a run at 6 a.m. every morning except Sunday, when he slept until 8. The man was a clock himself. Predictable. Rigid. Perfect. I also learned his vulnerabilities. Bradley was obsessed with control. His lawn was measured and manicured. His trash bins were color-coded. He had a doorbell camera, a security system, and motion sensor lights. He was the kind of man who probably alphabetized his spices and scheduled his bathroom breaks. But obsession with control means one thing: vulnerability to chaos. My plan formed slowly, like ice crystals growing in winter. It would be subtle, legal, maddening, and most importantly, completely deniable. Phase 1 began on a Monday morning. I woke up at 6:05 a.m., 5 minutes after Bradley started his run. I went to my garage, pulled out my old lawnmower, a gas-powered beast from 1987 that sounded like a helicopter having a seizure, and started it up. Now you might say, "Arthur, that's illegal before 7 a.m. And you'd be right in some places. But our neighborhood ordinances only prohibited sustained loud noise before 7 a.m. My mower ran for exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Not sustained. Just a brief morning greeting. I mowed the same 3x3 patch of lawn near Bradley's property line. Back and forth. The engine coughing black smoke and roaring like a mechanical dragon. When Bradley returned from his run, red-faced and sweating, he stared at me. I waved cheerfully and went inside. I repeated this every morning for a week. Not long enough to be illegal. Just long enough to be annoying. Just early enough to shave that perfect hour of silence Bradley enjoyed before work. By Wednesday, I could see him watching me from his window, phone in hand. But he never called the police. He knew. A 6-minute lawn mowing session wasn't illegal. Phase 2 began the following Monday. I have a nephew, Marcus, who's in a band. Terrible band. They call themselves Septic Discharge, and play something Marcus calls experimental noise metal. To me, it sounds like robots arguing in a garbage disposal. But Marcus owed me a favor. I'd lent him money for a van last year, and he was happy to help. I hired his band to practice in my garage. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, from 6 p.m. to 6:55 p.m. Exactly 55 minutes. Our noise ordinance allowed noise until 7 p.m., but said nothing about the quality of that noise. The first practice session was glorious. The bass shook my windows. The drums sounded like artillery fire. And the lead singer, a kid named Razorback Steve, screamed lyrics about corporate oppression and expired milk. I sat in my living room, wearing industrial earplugs, watching through my window as Bradley's face appeared and disappeared behind his curtain like a horrified jack-in-the-box. After the session ended, I went outside to thank the boys. Bradley was standing on his lawn, arms crossed. "That was completely inappropriate," he said, his voice tight. I smiled. "What was that?" "That noise. Oh, that's my nephew's band. They're practicing for a show." talented kids. It's awful. Art is subjective, Bradley. I gestured to his lawn. Some people think a lawn without a single dandelion is sterile and lifeless. But you like it, don't you? His jaw clenched. This is harassment. Is it? Because I've had the police here 14 times in 3 weeks, Bradley. 14 times. For hammering a nail. For laughing at the television. For living in my own home. I stepped closer. You wanted to teach me about noise complaints? Consider this my continuing education. He opened his mouth, closed it, then spun on his heel and went inside. The next day, a letter appeared in my mailbox. It was from Bradley's lawyer. The letter was 3 pages of legal jargon essentially saying I was creating a nuisance and needed to stop immediately or face potential legal action. I read it twice, then called my own lawyer, a woman named Susan Bernstein who'd handled Martha's estate. Susan, can they sue me for having a band practice in my garage during legal hours? Did you violate any noise ordinances? No. Then no, Arthur. They can send you scary letters all day long. Doesn't mean they have a case. I sent Bradley's lawyer a polite response explaining that all activities were legal and would continue. The band practiced for 3 more weeks. Twice a week. 55 minutes each time. I paid Marcus and his friends $100 per session. Best investment I ever made. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Phase 3 was inspired by a conversation with my friend Harold at the senior center. Harold used to be a radio engineer, and he told me something interesting. Wireless doorbells and security cameras can sometimes interfere with each other if they're on the same frequency. I bought 6 wireless doorbells from different manufacturers. I didn't install them anywhere. I just turned them on, one at a time, in my house, in various rooms, and let them sit there, broadcasting their signals into the ether. Within 3 days, Bradley's doorbell camera started malfunctioning. It would ring randomly. Send false motion alerts. I'd watch from my window as he came outside, looking around in confusion, finding nobody there. He called the company. They sent a technician. The technician couldn't find anything wrong. Because the problem wasn't his camera. It was interference from perfectly legal devices in a neighbor's home. After the doorbell, I moved to Phase 4, wind chimes. I hate wind chimes. Always have. They're the mosquitoes of outdoor decor. But I knew Bradley hated them even more because he tried to get Mrs. Chen's removed. I bought 37 wind chimes of varying sizes, tones, and materials. Aluminum. Bamboo. Glass. Ceramic. I hung them all around my backyard, positioned strategically so the prevailing wind would carry their chaotic symphony directly toward Bradley's house. The sound was magnificent. Like a gamelan orchestra made of demented angels. Bradley's bedroom window faced my backyard. I imagined him lying there at night, listening to the random clanging, unable to find peace, unable to control it. He couldn't call the police. Wind chimes aren't illegal. They're not even particularly loud. Just persistent. Uncontrollable. A constant reminder that the world doesn't bend to his will. By November, I could see the effects. Bradley looked tired. His lawn wasn't quite as perfect. He'd missed the occasional weed. His trash bins weren't always perfectly aligned. Good. Winter arrived, and with it my masterpiece. I'd been planning this part for weeks, but I needed the right conditions. Cold weather. Snow. The kind of winter that makes people want to stay inside their warm, quiet homes. December brought a blizzard. 15 inches of snow fell over 2 days, blanketing Elderberry Lane in white silence. The morning after the storm, I woke at 5 a.m. I dressed in my warmest coat, boots, and gloves. Then I grabbed a snow shovel and went outside. I didn't shovel my driveway. I shoveled Bradley's. All of it. The driveway, the walkway, around his car. I even cleared the snow off his Tesla. It took me 2 hours. My back screamed. My hands went numb. But I finished just before sunrise. Then I went home, made coffee, and watched. At 7:15 a.m., Bradley's front door opened. He stepped out, ready to tackle the snow, and stopped. Confusion washed over his face as he looked at his perfectly cleared driveway, his cleared walkway, his snow-free car. He looked around, suspicious, but there was no one else up yet. Just snowy silence. I could see his mind working. Who did this? Why? 2 days later, another storm. I did it again. Woke up early, shoveled everything, left no note. The third time, I saw him standing at his window at 5:30 a.m., watching me work. When I finished, I looked up at his window and waved. He ducked back behind the curtain. This was psychological warfare at its finest. Kindness as a weapon. He couldn't call the police on me for helping him. He couldn't complain about it. But it drove him crazy because he couldn't understand it, couldn't control it, couldn't stop it. After the fourth snowstorm, he left a note taped to my door. Please stop shoveling my driveway. I don't need your help. I ignored it. The next storm, I shoveled again. But I wasn't just shoveling. That was merely the visible component of Phase 5. While I shoveled his driveway in the pre-dawn darkness, I also made modifications to his property. Nothing damaging. Nothing illegal. Just adjustments. I moved his garden gnomes 1 inch to the left. All of them. I rearranged his recycling bins so the labels faced different directions. I adjusted his outdoor chair so it was no longer perfectly aligned with the edge of his porch. Tiny changes. Almost imperceptible. But for a man like Bradley, whose entire identity was built on order and control, these little disruptions were like sand in an oyster, constantly irritating, impossible to ignore. I'd watch from my window as he came home from work, paused, looked at something, frowned, and then went to fix it. His gnomes. His bins. His chairs. Always something slightly wrong, slightly off. It was beautiful. By January, Bradley was visibly fraying. I'd see him checking his property multiple times a day, adjusting things, measuring things. He installed more cameras. More lights. More sensors. But you can't install security against someone who's helping you. Against someone who's technically being a good neighbor. That's when he made his mistake. One evening in late January, Bradley knocked on my door. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hair was mussed. His typically pristine appearance was disheveled. "Why are you doing this?" he asked without preamble. I blinked innocently. "Doing what?" "All of it. The shoveling. The moving things. I know it's you. I shovel your driveway because I'm a kind neighbor. And I haven't moved anything of yours." "That would be trespassing." "You have. My gnomes are in different spots. My chairs keep moving. Something's always wrong. Bradley, have you considered that maybe the snow weight shifts things? Or that you're remembering wrong?" His face flushed red. "I'm not crazy." "I never said you were." I paused. "But you look tired. Have you been sleeping okay? All those wind chimes must be keeping you up." His hands balled into fists. "You're doing this on purpose." "The chimes, the band, the shoveling, all of it. It's revenge for the police calls." "Revenge?" I laughed. "Bradley, I'm 73 years old. I don't have the energy for revenge. I'm just living my life. If my nephew's band bothers you, well, they're only here twice a week during legal hours. If my wind chimes bother you, I'm sorry, but Mrs. Chin has wind chimes too. And I shovel your driveway because it's what good neighbors do. We both know what's really happening here. Do we?" I met his eyes. Because from where I'm standing, I see a young man who moved into a neighborhood and immediately started calling the police on an elderly veteran for the crime of existing. 14 times, Bradley? 14 times you sent armed officers to my door for hammering a nail, for laughing too loud, for playing music in my own home. Did you think there would be no consequences? Did you think you could bully an old man into silence? I wasn't bullying. Yes, you were. And now you're upset because I refused to be bullied. Because I'm fighting back using the same system you tried to use against me. The law. Ordinances. Rules. Everything I'm doing is completely legal, Bradley. Just like everything you did was technically legal. The difference is, I'm better at it. He stared at me, breathing hard, and I saw something break behind his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or realization. This has to stop. He whispered. I agree, I said. It should never have started. He turned and walked away. After that conversation, something changed. Bradley stopped coming out of his house as much. His curtains stayed closed. The lights were on at odd hours. His car would sometimes sit in the driveway for days. I actually started to feel a little guilty. I'd wanted to teach him a lesson, not break him. Then, on a Wednesday in early February, Bradley's house went up for sale. A for sale sign appeared in his yard. 24 hours later, there was a sale pending sticker across it. The man was so desperate to leave that he'd accepted the first offer. I'd won. Completely and utterly. But victory felt hollow. I sat in my living room that evening, trumpet in my lap, and thought about what I'd done. Yes, Bradley had started it. Yes, he'd been a bully. But had I gone too far? Had I become the very thing I'd fought against, someone who made another person's life miserable? 3 weeks later, moving trucks arrived at Bradley's house. I watched from my window as they loaded his furniture, his pristine belongings, his carefully ordered life packed into cardboard boxes. As the last box was loaded, Bradley appeared. He stood on his front lawn, looking at the house one final time. Then, surprising me, he looked directly at my window. Our eyes met across the distance. He raised his hand. Not in anger or frustration, but in something that looked almost like a salute. Acknowledgement. Respect for a worthy opponent. I raised mine back. Then he got in his Tesla and drove away. The next day, I took down all the wind chimes. I told Marcus the band wouldn't be practicing anymore. I put away my early morning lawn mower. A month later, a new family moved in. The Johnsons. Young couple with 2 small kids. The first day they were there, the kids ran across my lawn chasing a soccer ball. Mrs. Johnson came rushing over. I'm so sorry! Kids, get off Mr. Pemberton, I said. Arthur Pemberton. And it's fine. It's just grass. Let them play. She looked relieved. Thank you. We were worried about neighbors. The realtor said the previous owner was particular. Was he? I barely noticed him. I smiled. Welcome to the neighborhood. If you ever need anything, I'm right here. Over the following weeks, the Johnsons settled in. Their kids played in the yard. Mr. Johnson borrowed my ladder to hang Christmas lights in March. He'd forgotten to take them down. Mrs. Johnson brought over cookies to apologize for their dog barking at the mailman. One evening in April, I was in my garage working on a new project, a vintage music box, when little Emma Johnson appeared in the doorway. Mr. Pemberton? She said shyly. What are you doing? Fixing an old music box. Want to see? Her eyes went wide, and I spent the next hour showing her how all the little mechanisms worked. She asked a million questions. She touched everything with curious, gentle fingers. When her mother came looking for her, apologizing for the interruption, I waved it off. No interruption at all. She's welcome anytime. And she did come back. Emma and her brother Noah became regular visitors to my garage. I taught them about gears and springs. I told them stories about the war. I let them help with simple repairs. One afternoon, while Noah was carefully handing me screws one by one, he asked, Mr. Pemberton, were you friends with the man who lived here before us? Bradley? No, we weren't friends. Why not? How do you explain adult pettiness to a 7-year-old? How do you explain that sometimes people forget how to be neighbors, forget how to coexist, forget that the world doesn't revolve around their comfort? We just didn't understand each other, I said finally. Sometimes that happens. That's sad, Emma said. Understanding people is important. Yes, I agreed. Yes, it is. That evening, after the kids left, I stood in my driveway and looked at the house next door. The Johnsons had painted the shutters. They'd planted a garden. They'd let dandelions grow in their lawn, little yellow stars that Bradley would have napalmed into submission. It looked alive. Lived in. Happy. And I realized something. My revenge on Bradley Hutchins hadn't been the wind chimes or the band or the psychological warfare. My revenge had been showing him that his rigid, controlled, angry way of living was exhausting and miserable. That he could either adapt or leave. He chose to leave, and honestly, that was probably healthier for him than staying and trying to fight an unwinnable war against an old man with time, creativity, and nothing left to lose. But the real victory? The real victory was standing here in my driveway, listening to the Johnson kids laugh in their backyard, knowing that some new family was living in that house now with joy and mess and chaos and life. Bradley wanted silence. He wanted control. He wanted the world to conform to his expectations. I wanted community. I wanted tolerance. I wanted neighbors who understood that living next to people means accepting noise and differences and imperfection. In the end, we both got what we wanted. He got silence, somewhere else. I got good neighbors. It's been 2 years now since Bradley moved away. The Johnsons are still next door, and they're wonderful. Loud sometimes, yes. Their dog barks. Their kids shriek playing in the sprinklers. Mr. Johnson plays guitar badly on Saturday mornings. And it's perfect. Last week, Emma came over with a school project. She had to interview someone about a time they'd overcome a conflict. "Can I interview you, Mr. Pemberton?" she asked. "What kind of conflict?" I hedged. "Any kind. You're old, so you must have had lots of conflicts." I laughed. Kids are honest if nothing else. So I told her a version of the story. A simplified version where I'd had a disagreement with a neighbor about noise, and we'd both learned that communication and understanding were more important than being right. "So what did you learn?" she asked, pencil poised over her notebook. I thought about it carefully. "I learned that revenge doesn't actually make you feel better. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it's empty. What makes you feel better is building something good relationships, good memories, good communities. I also learned that sometimes people leave your life, and that's okay. It makes room for better people to arrive." She scribbled notes. "Is that why you're nice to us?" "I'm nice to you because you're good kids and good neighbors. And because your mother makes excellent cookies." She giggled. "She says you can come over for dinner Sunday if you want. We're making spaghetti. Tell her I'd be honored." After Emma left, I went to my workshop. I've been working on something new lately, not a restoration this time, but a creation. A wooden toy carousel for the Johnson kids, with hand-carved horses and a music box mechanism that plays. The entertainer. It's loud work. Sawing, drilling, sanding. Sometimes I test the music box, and it chimes through the house. But nobody calls the police. Nobody complains. The Johnsons just smile and wave when they hear it, knowing I'm making something for their children. That's what being neighbors should be. That's what community should be. As I work, I sometimes think about Bradley. I wonder where he ended up. I wonder if he found a neighborhood where everyone is as quiet and controlled as him, where the lawns are perfect and the noise is minimal and everything runs on schedule. I hope he did. I genuinely do. Because while I wanted to teach him a lesson, I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted him to understand that the world is messy and loud and full of people who don't fit into neat categories. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Marcus. "Hey Uncle Art, the band's playing a show next month. Want to come? I'll get you earplugs." I text back. Wouldn't miss it. Because that's another thing I learned from my war with Bradley Hutchins. Life is short. Too short to spend it being angry or rigid or controlling. Too short to call the police on your neighbors for being human. Too short to wage wars over wind chimes and music. But life is also long enough to defend yourself. Long enough to push back against bullies. Long enough to prove that age doesn't mean weakness, and that an old man with time and determination can be more formidable than any angry young professional. I turn back to my carousel, running my hand over the smooth wood. The horses are coming along nicely. One more week and I'll attach the music box mechanism. Then I'll surprise the Johnson kids with it. And if it's loud when I test it? If the music carries through the walls and fills the neighborhood with sound? Well, that's just the sound of life. The sound of creation. The sound of a community where people care about each other instead of policing each other's volume. Bradley Hutchins never understood that. Maybe someday he will. But that's not my problem anymore. I pick up my sandpaper and get back to work, humming When the Saints Go Marching In, as I smooth the wooden carousel horse's mane. In the distance, I can hear the Johnson kids playing, their laughter carrying through the spring air like music. It's a good sound. A perfect sound. The sound of victory.